Hello everybody and good evening. My name is Neil Redfern. I'm the Executive Director of the Council for British Archaeology, and I'm absolutely delighted to be introducing tonight's This is Archaeology lecture. Bronze, Beer and Boats, bringing prehistoric archaeology to life at Stanwick Lakes. Before I introduce our fantastic trio of speakers, I would just like to do some housekeeping for you. So, first of all, please do use the chat for any comments or observations. However, if you've got any questions for our panelists, which we'll come to at the end, could you use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens, please, and you'll post your questions in there. We would like you all to abide by the CBA's Code of Conduct. A link will be put in the chat. Again, I've got a little support team behind the scenes. We have zero tolerance for any inappropriate activity. So please abide by our Code of Conduct and respect our speakers and other members of the audience. Again, just a reminder, questions into the Q&A, general conversation, observations into the chat, please. That's absolutely fine. Once I finish introductions, I'll be turning my screen off so that the three speakers have the full floor, and their presentation will last about 45 minutes. I will then come back and actually help you all through your questions and your Q&As. So who have we got for you tonight? Well, we've got a trio, as I said, of amazing speakers. First up is Dr. James Dilley, who has led the Bronze Age boat build at Stanwick Lakes. And James and prehistoric stone, metalworking, you name it, construction is James' bag. And I've met James a couple of times and have actually one of his Bronze Age axe heads, which is really exciting, particularly when you see them being made. So huge experience about actually how this stuff is actually created. Nadia Norman is the Heritage Coordinator at Stanwick Lakes, the site where all this activity has been happening, in particular the Bronze Age boat build. And then finally, we've got Aiden Phillips. Aiden was a watch manager for Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service and is the initiator of Operation Phoenix, which is a project looking at blue light services using archaeology as a way of improving their mental health. He was also a founding member of the Islington Archaeological Society. So you are going to be in great hands tonight. And what I'd like to do now is pass you over to James to hear more about bringing prehistoric archaeology to life at Stanwick Lakes. Thank you all.
Thanks, Neil. On behalf of myself and Aiden and Nadia and Op Phoenix and everyone at Stanwick Lakes, thank you for having us to begin with and supporting what we're doing and hoping to do in the future. So I suppose this is just an overview of what we've done so far, what we've learned along the way. Nadia's going to give a little bit of an overview of the site itself. So I'm going to give a sort of inroad into the project, I guess, partly from my perspective, but I suppose talk about how projects like this are really beneficial in archaeology, in my opinion, which is unbiased, just so long as bronze or stone axes are involved. But as I said, not biased. So I'm going to have to start with a bit of a Chris Whitty and ask for next slide, please. So this slide and this image is actually from the Boyne Valley at the Douth Estate, and it came from some filming work for the new Brunner Boyne Centre. So if you've been there in the last couple of years and have seen the video of Neolithic people doing things in the visitor centre, then this was one of the scenes. And as a kid, I can remember seeing it both in books, TV, media, reconstructions of people doing things like boat building or making houses, you name it. And as a kid, I was fully inspired by that. One of my goals in life, even as a child, was to in some way live that scene. You know, everyone's wanted to be a Jedi in Star Wars or similar. I still want to be that, but also wanted to be within that prehistoric scene. So having the opportunity through what I do to recreate some of those scenes has been an absolute honor. And I think the best connection that I've ever found to that is actually being on the water, despite not being particularly keen on swimming, can swim, but not being particularly keen. It gives you that opportunity to be really close to nature and the surrounding landscape in very much a similar way to prehistoric people. So when Stanwick Lakes approached me with the opportunity to be part of a project to look at the heritage development on site, I jumped at the chance because being able to build another log boat, a series of log boats that would become a prehistoric, specifically Bronze Age vessel, was exactly my area of work. So it was this scene that I suppose that I wanted to work on because it's all well and good enjoying it yourself, but being able to share that enjoyment and that experience was very much, well, for us as a mantra and ethos, I suppose, is trying to make prehistory as accessible to as many people as possible through actually having a go themselves, watching us go out there on the water for the first time, you name it, any opportunity that we can really bring a bit of prehistoric goodness into the world. This was exactly the project that I think I'd been looking for the last however many years before it came along. So if I could, again, Chris Whitty style, have the next slide, please. So to begin with, it was down to planning and strategy. Where were we going to get the logs big enough for? What were we going to use as an archaeological inspiration? Well, I suppose Stanwick Lakes is really well situated in that the Nen or Nene River, controversially, runs through the site. And for those that are within prehistoric circles, may be aware of the late Bronze Age pile dwelling settlement Must Farm, which is further down the river, which was found within the Paleo Channel, some amazing dugout canoes or log boats, if you will, mostly from the late Bronze Age, and may well have been associated with a settlement that burns down. But outside of the area, we also looked at log boats from Europe and further afield as well. As you can see from the picture in the top left, we even looked at the Pesce canoe, the oldest watercraft in the world, around 10,000 years ago in the Netherlands. But I suppose for many reconstructed log boats out there, we wanted to aim for something that could really demonstrate both the skill of prehistoric people and actually put us as the builders to the test a little bit. Essentially, what I didn't want to end up with was a logboat flume log that looked as if it had been sort of chipped and slightly hollowed out. I wanted something a bit more refined because from previous experience of boat building when I was finishing my PhD at Southampton, if you do it quickly just to get a job done within a few days, that's all we had, you do end up with a vessel that does look a bit loggy and do get questions like, oh, do you think it will float? I'm sure you can imagine the answer of, yeah, of course it will, mate. It's a piece of wood, but similar. We want something that's refined with some good quality woodworking. But we needed those tools, I suppose, and that was part of how the project wasn't just boat building. It would be a network, a connected conundrum, a whole spectrum of different things that we could learn, I could learn, the team could learn along the way, because I'm fortunate enough to make and use some of my tools only occasionally. Most of our work, if you've come across us or even seen us before, is making, whether it be for a museum display, handling sessions, or even anyone who has bought an axe or similar on the website. So being able to actually test them to destruction gave us a much better feel for how some of the tools that the likes of Must Farm might have fitted into the world of everyday people. So that's exactly what we needed to do, was make some tools, which I'm hoping will be in the next slide, please. It will be in a future slide. This is me trying to remember what slides I've got ahead, but I suppose more importantly, we actually needed some raw material first. And fortunately, just down the road at the Boughton Estate, they have some enormous lime trees, some real veterans that for many country houses have lime avenues. Most prehistoric log boats really range in species. Many of them are made of oak, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were mostly made of oak in prehistory. Oak survives much better in the record, so is represented far more frequently. The downside of oak is that, as well as it's slow growing, it is also blooming heavy, and these days quite expensive. The advantage of lime is that it is generally somewhat resistant to splitting. far easier to access these days, far more cost effective, and from a future proofing point of view, which was always a key part of the project, light. So that the team, once either I move on to other projects, or although watch this space, we might have other projects coming up, who knows? My aim would be to leave the vessels there on site so that if the team or Stanwick Lakes wanted to have their own open days, the boats would be there to use with just a handful of experienced and trained people. They wouldn't need to bring in any heavy lifting equipment, as you can sort of see from the picture, that needed some very heavy lifting equipment, because the heaviest of the logs was about 1.2 ton. So we would have been more than we could have managed to bring it all the way down the road to Stanwick Lakes. Perhaps we could have floated it down. Oh, perhaps a future project. Can we float the logs onto site? Oh, hopefully Nadia didn't hear that. But we were really lucky to be supported by the Army in bringing these log boats onto site. And as you can see, the three of them standing with Becky there, the site manager and heritage coordinator, alongside Nadia, standing very happily, well, somewhat happily. I'm happy because the log boats are on site and ready to be worked on. So that was first step, is sourcing the materials, and is often a tricky part of many archaeological projects that involves some kind of experiment, because many of the materials either aren't accessible anymore or are just very, very hard to source or refine, procure, process, you name it. So from an experimental point of view, this was part one where we could start to learn, and we could start to strip the bark away from the logs as these have been recently cut. And within our network of other projects going on at site, much of that bark could then be thrown into the lakes, retted to allow the layers to delaminate, and then passed on to the I have to get the name right, the Guild of Spinners, Weavers and Dyers. I think I've got it. Yep, there we go. Who could use some of the lime bast for some of their projects. And this was the advantage of a project like this, is that as well as trees going in, we hope for materials coming out as well, so that we could engage an even wider audience for some of their own projects that they would develop alongside. So if I could have the next slide, please. There we go. We had to make our tools. I knew it was coming up somewhere. I just had to remember where it was. So we needed our own tools. And this was perhaps where a little bit of media attention helped the project start to gain a little bit of traction, because the volunteers were keen. I was keen. The site staff were keen as well. And we wanted to start to build up some momentum. We wanted people coming back week after week to see how the boat was progressing, so that they could actually start to appreciate the time, effort, but also the efficiency of the tools. So a few weekends were spent with the team making their own axes, adzes, and other tools. But from an outreach point of view, as I said, using both social media and local BBC outlets, it was here that I was keen to really start to build up that interest. Thanks, Nadia. So I guess this was meeting one with the team, which again, you can perhaps gauge my levels of excitement looking at the logs, and the team around me looking less excited perhaps when they have actually gauged the amount of work involved. But this was the boatyard that I wanted us to have, this scene of production that people could walk past on a daily basis, popping into the site to actually see the archaeology unfolding and see the creation, the boats being dug out, that they could keep coming back to. We wanted something that people think, oh, we'll just pop down to see how they're getting on, or oh, they're doing something, we can go and see how the boat's getting on. And this is perhaps why Stanwick Lakes is such an amazing site for this, as well as having fantastic traction and footfall for people coming in to use the actual visitor centre, the amazing cafe, or just the absolutely stunning play park. The Trading Places barn behind me is often running workshops, so there's always something on. So we had the perfect site for being able to engage with people and end up with large amounts of people watching and asking questions. And for my objective early on, it was to equipped the team with the experience and the knowledge and importantly the tools, both physically and I suppose orally, to engage with the public confidently with the archaeology that they're starting to engage with as they themselves started to become connected with it from that physical point of view and their audience around them. Thanks, Nadia. So the boats started to progress, as you can see, and with the help of my partner Emma Jones, who makes a lot of museum and sort of prehistoric craft videos, many of which you may have seen out and about in the wild. The bark was stripped, the top plank was taken off, and we could start to dig into them. And you can see how we had to plan our way in because these large trunks, or seemingly trunks, or these large pieces of wood, are not trunks. They are actually branches. Would you believe it? We were promised by Boughton Estate that come May, the storms that you often get in May, we would have a plethora of trees. You could take your pick. There'd be too many. One came down and it had a huge trunk over a meter in width, but it was only about 4 foot high. Fortunately, the branches of the trunk were just about acceptable, just about workable. So we thought that if we could make boats from these, we could make boats from anything. These would not be the kinds of pieces of timber that we would have chosen in prehistory. And as you can see for myself, and one of the volunteers, Dave, in the bottom left, we're having to plan our way really carefully into the log and had to overcome lots of challenges along the way. And usefully for me as that tool maker that I mentioned earlier, seeing how some of those bronze axes were being used not just as axes and adzes, but scrapers, wedges that left very obvious use wear marks all over the tools was really, really special for me because for some aspects of it, I hadn't particularly guided them towards doing particular actions. Many of them were experienced woodworkers, so they used either their own experience or just intuition to use some of these slightly unusual prehistoric tools. Thanks, Nadia. So they started to take shape, and the wood chips were frequently gathered up and used for walkways, pizza ovens, barbecues, you name it. It became quite a scene of cooking food and flying bits of wood. But as the boat started to change shape and we started to overcome challenges along the way, we could start to plan out our three methods of production. The first being to simply chip the entire hull out, the other to burn a vessel out, and finally to cut grooves into the wood and then split large chunks out, which is the quickest method and would have involved putting a transom board at the back, which you'll see shortly. Thanks, Nadia. And alongside the boat build, as I said, we had the barbecue, of course, to keep us going, a very prehistoric feel to it. We had to make paddles as well, and we had to utilize some of our local materials, whether it be clay on the inside of the boat to prevent it overburning or burning out the sides or burning too deeply. And we were starting to realize how important even just small tree limbs would be to act as levers, as wedges, you name it. It wasn't just axes or adzes or even paddles for the end. There was a huge collection of important tools that you'd only use once, but still vitally important, that is often missed within, I suppose, our mindset that would fit into how people might have operated in prehistory. As I said, an axe is not necessarily just an axe, and the same with a beveled or pointed stick. That may be the most useful tool on site because it has so many possibilities. But alongside the paddles, we also wanted to look at how charcoal is made for the types of bronze tools that we were making would be heated up to over 1,000 degrees. So as you can see, Aiden's adding some hazel to the clamp at the bottom there. So it was important for me, as I said, to add lots of different crafts and activities that we were all learning together along the way. And in the talk, it mentions beer. I'm not especially going to talk about the archaeology of beer today because we just don't have time. I suppose, as well as the alliteration of adding beer on the end, it was important to, as well as the actual build itself, make our bronze and barbecue, there we go, and another B, that we could enjoy a couple of beverages along the way as well once we'd finished the day, so that we could have an enjoyable debrief. And that was as I was hoping to start to achieve that community feel as the people who perhaps might have known each other either through work or local connections started to become friends. And within our WhatsApp group, were able to share updates as they were popping down to do a bit of work, either on the paddle or a boat, or just sharing interesting articles or joking. It was that togetherness that I wanted in the project. And it's that I really started to see coming together and have seen in lots of other archaeological projects that add so much concrete to it. And I don't mean that in the coldest sense, but it adds so much integrity to it, so much strength and mass. And it's that we were fortunate enough to have the right recipe of people. Thanks, Nadia. So to continue the theme park log flume theme, it was a case of checking the news as they are on Disneyland back in 2006, ensuring that the project got good coverage and the kind of coverage we wanted was really important. What we didn't want was to give the impression that a load of people were just on their spare time on a bit of a jolly, just having a bit of fun and just seeing if they could put a floaty bit of wood into water. It was more important than that. We wanted to really put both Stanwick Lakes on the map as well as the archaeology. And this is as it started to progress forward, where we were joined both by reenactors to wear on that particular very, very hot day woolen clothing. Goodness, it was a very hot day, but they're both Spanish. They're used to those kinds of hot temperatures. Both Marcos and Lorena there, who as well as creating Bronze Age costume alongside the build, could then take what they've learned onto other projects as well. So their help along the way to create some of those Bronze Age scenes, as I mentioned, it was really important. And it was that as the project started to come towards its end, I was hoping to build that scene as we came back in the full circle. Thanks, Nadia. So the vessel starts to come together and starts to look like more than just a log flume log, as Richard and I are planning out there how rather than just log boats, we could actually have a multi-hulled vessel, but perhaps a single catamaran or a three hulled catamaran, because we really just wanted to work out how many people we could get on, how much weight we could put on the boat. Could you use this to actually carry livestock or goods down the River Nen? Is it a vessel like this that would have been used for carrying goods and valuables up and down the Nen to somewhere like Must Farm? Is it on a boat like this that something like the glass beads that might have been made in the Far East made their way up the River Nen and to Must Farm? Quite possibly. So the excitement was starting to build as it reached its final phases. Thanks, Nadia. And then it was a case of sink or swim as we got towards the end. As you can see, the vessels are lined up, looking over the Solstice Lake, still with plenty of refinement to go. And as you can see from the BBC article, we had to carefully fit the transom board at the back and line it with clay. And towards the latter half of the project, we had some of the amazing archaeologists from Cambridge Archaeological Unit who had worked on Must Farm, who were able to use some of the bronze tools, the replicas, similar to those that they'd excavated on the boat build, and as well as seeing some of the working marks that they'd recognized on the original Bronze Age boats. When we, excuse me, were starting to add clay to things like the transom board or to plug any holes that people might have made along the way, they saw exactly that on the original. So without prompting, it was amazing to see that in many cases, often simple logic worked in both the Bronze Age as it did in the modern day. Thanks, Nadia. So it was the final sprint before the launch, and I think a few of us had expressions like this little girl at the front there as we hurtled towards launch day, with both media excitement, the local community, followers and friends on social media, all starting to think about gathering for this launch day. We knew the pieces of wood would float, but would they float together? Would they turn upside down? Would we end up in the water and just look rather silly? Or would we actually sail off into the distance and set up our own pirate colony on the tiny island in the middle of Solstice Lake? Well, that perhaps, but getting ahead of myself. That's for a future project, maybe. But essentially, it was keeping that momentum and trying to engage with as many outlets as possible and keeping the team together and excited for that project end. Thanks, Nadia. And here is just a few of those Bronze Age scenes that I'd been hoping to capture. And these are just a handful of some of the images that Em managed to capture as we were fitting the transom boards just to ensure they came together, or ensuring that the cross bars fitted in the right place, the boats were balanced, you name it. It was these scenes that I suppose I'd pictured in the start in my mind that I was hoping to then use as our springboard, perhaps for future projects, as evidence of this is how you can make experimental or experiential archaeology tangible. This was a project that we'd started with some very, very large lime trunks. We'd made our own tools, we'd made our own boats, we'd brought all the materials in, and we'd all learned and enjoyed together. And we then had the rather somber evening that was meant to be our final celebration evening, but really had more of a somber mood. And I think it was the realization that this project was actually over come the next day, that rather than that togetherness and clinking of glasses, it was, well, once we get through tomorrow, what's next? And as I said, there was a muted feel to the evening. I suppose from doing little bits of filming here and there, once you get past a few days filming, you definitely feel a low because you're out of that excitement, that group togetherness, that comradeship of working on a project together. And once it's all over, you feel that detachment. And it was this that I suppose is as good a feedback as you can get, that we needed something else to focus on. But beside that slight doom and gloom, for the scenes of concentration, or indeed possibly a little bit of frustration and violence creeping in, as you can see in the bottom right, it was this humour and togetherness that I was keen to cultivate in a perfectly safe way, of course. Thanks, Nadia. And then it was a case of, well, putting it out on the water. And as you can see from the smiles and laughter and the odd strange pose here and there, perhaps a little too much time out in the sun there for one of our volunteers, that we were fortunate to enjoy on the day. Even for all of the organisation of running round and setting up the event space, I was, I suppose, lucky to have that moment of pushing the vessel out on the Solstice Lake in the evening, using the punt exactly as they may well have at Must Farm. I guess, felt almost a little emotional that I was able to have that cyclica moment, that I could be back on the water, surrounded by birds making their evening calls, with the reeds around me and no noise other than the dual carriageway just on the other side of the trees. But if you block that out and cover your ears, somehow as you're paddling, you're there back in prehistory 3,000 years ago. And Emma, who you can see in the bottom right, managed to capture it all. And on the day itself, we were clearly blessed by otherworldly forces. After casting and throwing a bronze sword into the water, all the boats floated, regardless of whether anyone fell in the water. In fact, ITN News was so keen to capture the bronze sword that they asked for a second to be cast and thrown into the lake, as you do. But clearly, a second sword made the day that much better, as everything did go according to plan. So I think that's possibly my last slide. Could you just go one more, Nadia? Just oh no, a bit more celebration that we were at the end, given the finale, and as well as some tired faces, you can see generally some happy faces, both in the audience and in the team, who had worked amazingly well together and have picked up and learned so much along the way that they've now been desperately keen to move on to the next thing, which, as I said, watch this space. So I'm hoping this genuinely is my last slide now, and that I can hand over to Nadia to continue. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone. Hello, my name is Nadia. I'm going to be introduced by Neil. I'm the Heritage Coordinator at Stanwick Lakes, and part of my job was to work with wonderful people like James, but also as a support to the volunteers that we knew we were going to be encouraging to be involved in our projects. So James has done a wonderful job, thank you, James, of describing the togetherness of the Bronze Age boat build project. And what I'm really going to talk about is an overview of us as a site, Stanwick Lakes as a site, and a bigger project that the boat build kind of was encompassed with, especially with the theme of this year and the push towards well-being and understanding of well-being and heritage together. I do strongly feel that this project, the boat build and the other ones that we took part in, really showcase that incredibly well. So without further ado, I have to remember to click. So Stanwick Lakes, what are we? For those of you that aren't local to Northamptonshire, we are a 750-acre nature reserve. We're a nationally significant noted heritage site. We have over 15 lakes, over 7 miles of pathways, and we are a real fusion of landscape and heritage. Stanwick Lakes came about because of the last 4 or 5 decades of work in the area. Between 1984 and 1992, there was a large-scale archaeological rescue within this area of the valley, starting in Raunds, due to the housing and road network upgrades and the quarrying that was scheduled to happen within this part of the valley. The archaeology started over in Raunds, and as they crossed over the bypass, they continued to find a whole plethora of heritage genuinely beneath the feet. They uncovered a landscape that was had proven that there was human settlement and activity within this part of the valley from Neolithic all the way through to medieval. And for a site of this size to have all of that history, it's really important for us at Stanwick Lakes to be able to share that history with our visitors and our communities. The quarrying only took place for about 7 or 8 years. And then in the early 2000s, it was returned to nature reserve. And in 2006 is when Rockingham Forest Trust took it over to run it as an area nature reserve. And it's from there that the nature and heritage themes of our site have kind of all come together. We have been running heritage projects at Stanwick Lakes now for about 10 years. We're hugely grateful to the National Lottery Heritage Fund because genuinely without them, it would be incredibly difficult for a charity to be able to do heritage projects of this scale. Our ultimate aim is to tell that story. We do not have, or we have very little heritage visible above ground. We are not an active archaeological dig. Everything that was uncovered during the archaeological excavations was boxed and taken to Portsmouth by English Heritage because of the timescales of the quarrying. So it really has been a drip feed over the last 3 decades or so of information and papers and just kind of almost little teasers, little snippets of what archaeology and their interpretation of it. So this project was designed to explore specifically the Bronze Age and the Iron Age history of the Stanwick Lakes site, which in itself is a really, really vast project. So obviously you've already heard about the amazing big Bronze Age boat build, as it was so aptly named. But we go big or go home at Stanwick Lakes, and it was just one part of a handful of other projects that we were doing within this to explore those eras. We also constructed a replica Iron Age settlement, as you can see here in the photos. For the last 10 years or so, we have had a lone roundhouse sitting within this spot at Stanwick Lakes. It overlooks the area of the site where the Iron Age settlement was uncovered during the archaeological dig, so it's a very appropriate place. But we wanted to make it more engaging and more relevant to our visitors. The majority of our visitors probably do come for the nature reserve, the cycling and the activities. So a lot of what we do with our heritage interpretation is working around the accidental heritage and people being able to come across it and engage with it really, really easily. Settlement, since it's been built, as you can see here, lovely blue sky, sunny day, we now use it as a learning and schools education space. We have living history events, and it's also just a really pleasant place for our visitors to sit and picnic and play. We quite often come down there and find the benches have been moved and other stick sort of structures have started to appear. And it's lovely to have a space where people are so engaged with heritage, even if they're not fully aware that they are. James made mention earlier of our wonderful guild, the Northants Guild of Spinners, Weavers and Dyers. They moved into they came to an event in 2022 in our small heritage barn, claimed squatters' rights and have never left, and have been working on an absolutely fantastic project over the last 3 years. They have been replicating Iron Age textiles through the research undertaken of the Holdremos woman, the bog body from Denmark found in the 1870s. Because of the level of preservation of Holdremos woman, the reports are absolutely fantastically detailed with the colour analysis, the dye analysis, the detail on the type of weave, the type of wool that was used. And again, the Weavers Guild, that they really showcase. And as you can see here in the photo demonstrated by Julie, a full replica of the Holdremos woman's outfit, produced by hand, using hand spinning only. The dyes created with the plants in our heritage gardens from a legacy heritage project. So a wonderful project to be able to say that everything was handmade on site. The shawl alone there that Julie is wearing took over 1,300 meters of hand spun wool, which was then woven on a warp weighted loom. So again, lots and lots of experience there, not just for the guild, but for our visitors as well. And then working with Historic England, the other side of our heritage project for the Bronze and Iron Age was the restoration of our Bronze Age round barrow. It's the only existing monument still left after the archaeological excavations. By the time the archaeologists had got to site, there was only 2 barrows still visible above ground. The others had over many, many hundreds of years been ploughed out and destroyed by river erosion and flooding. So it was decided that during the excavations that the barrow, very romantically named Barrow 2 in the archaeological reports, would remain as a standing monument rather than being excavated. Some wonderful person during the quarry works had the hindsight to build a huge 3-meter soil bund around it to stop the quarry vehicles from accidentally driving into it. So it wasn't visible in the landscape. It hasn't been visible in the landscape for the last 30 or 40 years until we came along on this project. The soil bund did a fantastic job of protecting it, but it had also created a space that was overgrown. It wasn't visible from the pathways. It had become home to a lovely bunch of rabbits, which were not helping with the erosion. And so what we wanted to do is return this monument to the landscape once again. And you can see in the bottom right there in the photo, it is now easily accessible. It has a walkway path all the way around so that our visitors can actually engage with the monument, especially beautiful at sunrise and sunset. We're really proud of that part of the project. And certainly from a community wellbeing point of view, we didn't expect the amount of positivity from the communities around this part of the project. It was a very almost a sterile part of the project because it was all undertaken by an archaeologist under direction from Historic England. It was probably one of the most straightforward projects of this 3-year project in terms of the logistics. But we had underestimated the positive feeling from the communities once it was there on display. We had many comments from frequent visitors saying, I've been walking my dog here for 10 years and I never knew it was here. So that's been a really lovely thing to have been able to have achieved with that. It's put us on the map, Stanwick Lakes, for a number of reasons. Not only just for the monuments, but for the work that was undertaken. All of these projects were volunteer led. And although there's myself and my manager Becky in the background, it's people like Aiden and the other volunteers, led by the relevant experts like James, who plan the day to day, from the designing to the logistics to the tools that are needed. I see myself quite often as the tea and coffee bringer or the procurement manager, offering that support. And I think that's where this project really came into its own. We're not just building things for the sake of things. We're building things, we're restoring things that link intrinsically to our intangible cultural heritage, but we're also doing it in a way that involves not just the visitors and the communities, but the volunteers. Our volunteers for this project over the 3 years gave over 8,000 hours of their time. We wouldn't have been able to have done this project without them. And being able to get hands-on with history in that respect has had a huge number of incredible benefits. At Stanwick Lakes, we already have a really popular and endorsed PCN network for social prescribing for walks that has been running for many years. But we also have a lot of well-being groups that have very much come through to Stanwick Lakes in this sort of community-led well-being through volunteering or through just being a regular visitor, coming to our events. And there's wonderful, wonderful links between all those groups where we want to offer that flexibility in volunteering. So we don't restrict our volunteers to just one or the other. They are absolutely open to not just give their time wherever they can, but to tell us where their interest lies and trying out and linking up with other volunteering groups across the site. And this has created a really wonderful network of volunteers who have not only had this togetherness, a word that James used quite often, but also this connection with the site through the nature and the heritage work, where it is now very easy for them to have that passion and that sense of belonging. And I think sometimes when people talk about well-being, it's very difficult to not think about data and how do you prove these things. But I think that when volunteers have a passion and they're returning, that actually that is that sense of belonging. And that is where well-being and heritage are so intrinsically linked and are so very important. As I said, we really, really push the well-being through heritage, but not in a structured, formal way, if you like. Our volunteers share a common purpose in creating and caring for these spaces. So by being part of the design and the discussions and the ideas very, very early on, there is that sense of them gaining a benefit, not just with the physical skills, but with the mental improvement that can come with being a part of this community, this togetherness. Being able to see the progress of each project and be involved in the progress of them as well has been really motivating, not just for the volunteers, but for the team at Stanwick Lakes as well, regardless of weather. And it's transformed the site, it's transformed these spaces into more than just standalone heritage areas. They've enriched the whole visitor experience at Stanwick Lakes, and we're incredibly proud of all that they've achieved. It's a privilege to work with the volunteers. I'd like to think the volunteers would say the same about us. I'm sort of giving Aiden a bit of a sly nudge there for his talk in a second, but it's not only have we grown the number of volunteers and evolved these spaces, it's genuinely left a lasting legacy, which will go beyond me and the team, hopefully for many decades to come. As part of our project evaluation, obviously it's always nice to try and do some data around well-being and heritage, as difficult as that may be. There were some really wonderful comments that came out of our 2024 volunteer survey, and the main four mentions that you can see here is so the first one, social connection. Obviously, just being part of a group, a community, that togetherness that comes from being a part of a project, even if you're not meeting everybody or taking part with everybody all the time, meeting like-minded people, being able to share that passion and that knowledge with our visitors. You saw in some of James's shots that during the boatyard, there was always so many members of the public and visitors around, and actually listening to our volunteers being able to share their passion and their knowledge through everything that they'd learned was just completely wonderful. Feeling part of a community, a strong team spirit. James mentions beer, barbecues obviously help, but genuinely feeling that they had some ownership over the projects. But of course, the learning and skills opportunities, every single one of our projects has had some level of skills development or opportunities to try a craft, a traditional craft that they wouldn't necessarily have had the chance to do, from metalworking, wood carving, textiles. It's been a really important part of us, and we're really glad that that came out through the volunteer survey as well. And of course, the environment, being able to work outdoors on a nature reserve, does something positive to your mental health and well-being. And that was something that came out really highly in it as well. And so really for my final slide, what has been the key takeaway for me from this project, including the boat build, but all of them all together, is this lasting legacy. The fact that even though the project has technically finished, the volunteers are all still coming in week on week to maintain these spaces, to come up with ideas on how we could improve or change or adapt these spaces, ideas for future projects. And it's that ownership that makes us feel that real sense of achievement for what we've been able to create. By being able to connect both heritage and nature in such a wonderful setting, it has had a lasting impact on the site and us as the people who have been involved in this. Everything they've done with a sense of ownership and empowerment and pride. And I think that's a really important aspect to remember as well. And it's through working with people like Aiden and James who keep that community and togetherness together, that really is sort of the cherry on top, really, for these sort of hands-on and experiential archaeology, which we never could have imagined at the beginning. So at this point, I will be handing over to the wonderful Aiden Phillips to talk about his wellbeing initiative, Operation Phoenix. Don't let him undersell himself, because him and the Operation Phoenix team have been an absolute key part of our heritage projects at Stanwick Lakes over the next 3 years. So I'll give it to you, Aiden. Thank you.
A good time to turn my microphone on, I think. Thanks, Nadia. Thank you very much, and James, for that run up. And yeah, could I go to the next slide, please? So I'm here to sort of talk as a member of the bigger Bronze Age boat build team, and also as the lead person for Operation Phoenix. And so I'll start just quickly chat about Operation Phoenix, give you a little bit of background on that. It's based around the Ministry of Defence project or programme called Operation Nightingale. Operation Phoenix aims to support blue light workers to improve their physical and mental well-being through archaeologically based activities. The pilot has been fully supported by Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service and its wellbeing team, of which I was a member alongside my role as Operational Incident Commander, leading Greenwatch Moulton in Northampton for the best part of 38 years. Next, please. We thought we'd experiment with different ways of saying next, please, but anyway. The programme relies on wonderful partnerships with local providers like Stanwick Lakes and the Northamptonshire Archaeological Resource Centre at Chester House Estate. The ARC, as it's known, provides access to amazing archaeological specialists and the entire content of its curated collection with its huge array of artefacts. Everything from small finds all the way through to monumental carved stonework to study, including the remains of over 1,000 individual skeletal remains. In addition to this, the Urchester Field School is open to us for an entire week each year to gain hands-on experience of excavation work, and supported by experts from the University of Leicester Archaeological Resource Services team, ULAS. So Stanwick Lakes, on the other hand, offers Operation Phoenix participants access to heritage craft activities and projects such as the Iron Age roundhouse recreation and the hugely significant Big Bronze Age boat build project. Along next, oh no, you got it. You're on it. So we obviously, as the heading suggests, we're trying to measure the impact that we're having, and we've also set up this research program with Breaking Ground Heritage and the University of Leicester. Due to past works from Breaking Ground Heritage and others, it is apparent, obviously, that engagement with heritage projects has hugely beneficial effects. Through our work, we are researching the specific benefits of our program for fire and rescue service personnel and beyond into other blue light providers. We intend to sort of distill what works best so that we can do more of the same, explore other opportunities and options, and the research also assists in building the business case and potential for expansion to the wider blue light community. Some of the snippets of feedback include that I've been put in a position to try new things. My productivity has already increased in my day job. I've learned how to develop new friendships, and I can take myself away and do something mindful. And one also commented that his wife told him that he's a different person when he got home, and I'm pretty sure that was meant in a positive way. Next slide, please. So the big Bronze Age boat build, well, goodness, we were invited to play, and play we did. We used finesse, as I've noted here. We used imagination, fire and brute force. The big Bronze Age boat build gave rein to our imaginations, and it allowed us to phenomenologically place ourselves in the shoes of our ancestors. We felt the muscle burn, we wore the blisters and lost the same blood. We knew success and we knew failures. We know triumph in the completion of a shared ambition, and knew the disappointment through holed hulls. A story for another day, but suffice to say, I managed to test our ability to repair holes in boats. Next, please. The big Bronze Age boat build was experimental versus experiential, science versus feeling, cutting versus burning, learning in doing. I used to think James was downgrading our endeavours by talking about experiential rather than experimental archaeology. I know now what he was on about. Science doesn't have hold of all of the answers. It can label and define, quantify and measure, but it cannot feel. We could work out how many cuts and chops, how many chips of wood and hours of labour taken to create the boats, but it can never help explain and define how it felt to finally launch and be in the boat with James on its maiden voyage, albeit with a scant regard for weight distribution and the levels of freeboard available. I took the foremost position toward the bow, but probably outweighed James by at least half. But we floated and were able to put the boat through a few manoeuvres without event. Anyway, the journey we embarked on taught us so much, and we explored as many of the possible stories around the boat builders of the past and how they might have gone about their business. I wrote a blog on the boat burn and cooked on it every time it was alight as well. Why wouldn't they have done just that? Sadly, there isn't much evidence of burning being employed, but I would expect it was. I still maintain that, contrary to James's disdain for the burning method, if I had spent as many hours burning as were spent cutting, the boat would have been finished in half the time. I sense a gauntlet going down. This project has had a deep and lasting effect on all who were involved. Our research shows just how impactful these kinds of programs can be and hugely positive outcomes they bring. And I will not bore you with the data here, but I can discuss this outside should I be interested. Do you have any questions? I'll stop. Yay.
Brilliant. Thanks, folks. I'm just turning my camera back on. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, we do have questions. We have an absolute plethora of questions. So if you're happy, I'm going to dive in and just start asking them, and you'll have to decide who's going to answer them. And they're a real range. So the first one I'm just going to just look into. James, I think this was probably actually going to be you. There was a question about you're using you're casting bronze, but someone thought, were you using a pair of iron tongs in that process? And if so, what would they have used as tongs in the Bronze Age if they didn't have iron?
That's quite right, and well spotted for the eagle-eyed questioner. Yes, they were steel, and I do use, as you will have seen, as well as the steel tongs, modern PPE equipment on workshops, because for our evidence of Bronze Age tongs, they are exceedingly limited, but are probably made of wood. As it doesn't melt. It does burn, which is quite exciting and scary when you try to do it yourself. And there are many ways to help try and slow the burning. But essentially, for the dangers, excitement, trepidation involved with people casting their first bronze object, I wanted them to be as comfortable and relaxed as possible, and flames starting to lick up a pair of wooden tongs towards their hands probably wouldn't have added much relaxation to the process. Our only evidence of Bronze Age tongs that may have been used in a hot not even metalworking process, but a hot process, is a small piece of glass slag from a late Bronze Age site in Italy that appears to have a pinch mark from wooden tongs, probably from drawing rods of glass to make beads or something similar. But bronze tongs wouldn't have worked for bronze casting, basically.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we're going technical now again. Sorry, this is about boats and transoms. So the transom is at the stern of the boat, isn't it? So it's actually the back of the boat. And the question, first one I've got is: did you experiment with different types of sealants of the transom other than clay?
Aiden, do you want to? We could both answer that, as Aiden needed to use it the most, shall we say?
What you're trying to say, James, but I don't, to seal up the hole that I made in the boat that James was alluding to earlier. We did some fancy footwork with the wedging, and I don't know what we actually used in the end, because I wasn't there for the sealing up process, James.
I think the first sealing agent we used was a resin and beeswax and charcoal mix, because we did for both some knots that had fallen out of the wood, based on evidence from Tibrin V in Denmark, a very, very late Mesolithic site from the Ertabolla period. They had actually sewn panels of leather in place, and then we'd put a sort of resin sealant around the outside. And what in between the two pieces of leather, we had tried just shaping a piece of wood. We had tried putting clay in between as well. And to be honest, the advantage of clay is that once it's had some moisture in it, it's somewhat flexible a little. And once it's held in place with the leather, that works really well. But for other holes or cracks that were noticed when the boats were being tested, clay, honestly, is the best and most effective thing, and particularly from Must Farm, which may, or hopefully will be, well, almost certainly will be noted when the Paleo Channel report comes out. Quite obvious balls of clay were found within some of the boats, almost definitely to repair any holes or cracks that appeared along the journey. And as there was clay in the lakes, we could dig it out before we set off, make some balls of clay and put them in the boats ready, much as they almost certainly would have in the Bronze Age. But they may have used wool, moss, you name it.
But we were lucky we didn't need it once we were afloat.
Yes, yeah, thankfully.
Which is a good intro, Aiden, into the next question. You had three methods of hollowing out. How did they compare? And so which boat then became the most successful?
Well, the longer boat was definitely the the favourite. That was all chipped out and cut, and it was trans-amended, and it's the sleekest and the most sort of identifiably boat-like of the others. The one I burnt out was one of the gnarly ones that really cutting it would have been very difficult anyway. And then the other one, as James was talking about, we cut sections out and removed the wood wholesale in slightly different fashion. But yeah, it was. I would say I think the burning, I lost all the hairs off my forearm, and I was the most unpopular husband every time I got home because of the state of me. So I don't think it was a particularly pleasant way of doing a boat, but it was certainly very effective.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And then a couple of questions on how long it took. So how many hours did it take you to build a boat? And do you think a skilled boat building team in the Bronze Age would have done it quicker?
Well, absolutely. Nadia, did you were recording the hours?
So
your turn.
The recorded hours for the boat build as a whole, so the 3 vessels, was just shy of 900 hours, 900 volunteer hours. But that does include the days that were more discussion rather than physical build. The days that were less about chipping away and maybe we had to move them and things like that. I think I speak for us all by saying the general consensus was definitely skilled boat builders in the Bronze Age who would have done this day in, day out, would have done it a lot quicker than we did.
Absolutely.
But then I think that comes back to the things that we look at, like James to in his. Did we have the ideal wood to start with? Did we have enough of the knowledge already, the intrinsic knowledge within the boat build individuals? And like what Aiden says about the burning, I know it's a bit of a contentious topic between him and James, but it was very effective in what it did. So the short answer is yes, I think they would have done it a lot quicker, but I think there would be a lot of factors that would go into that would have an effect on that, not just the skill of the person.
And on the burning, we've got a question. Was it easy to control the burning?
Generally, we used the river clay, and yes, it worked really well unless I dropped my guard. And there was one event where the fire did get up behind it along one edge and got pretty close. I think it got to about it singed the outside of the boat from the inside, so it was that close. But it stayed watertight, so yeah, it was really effective, I think. Yeah.
And I suppose, sorry, Neil, just to put into perspective a couple of points, that the 900 hours, including the sort of chat and the move and all the rest of it, it would take a single person based on the time in those 900 hours. That was not 900 hours of 8 people going at it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And particularly when we were trying to compare, because I think there was a follow-up question that I saw that was what did we base those the boats on? Quite closely to the Must Farm boats, but we did take a little bit of inspiration from other boats elsewhere. But to give you an idea of the range in size that we have of log boats, some of the longest are just over 10 meters, sometimes 11 meters, and the shortest around 2.5 meters. So they're quite a wide range, and the finest were actually some of the earliest. Again, from Tibrin V in Denmark, would strongly recommend getting a copy of the site report, which is very good. But the boats there, rather than bronze tools, were cut out with antler and stone tools, not polished stone. And they were made of lime also. And when the trees for the 10-meter boats were felled, they were estimated to be around 3 ton. And when they'd finished cutting them out, and they managed to cut the hull wall thickness down to about 2 centimeters, and the hull base to about 3 centimeters, and they managed to get the weight down to I think it's about 100 grams or 100 kilograms or so. So incredible skill that even with bronze tools we were nowhere near. And as I highlighted earlier, we were not working with the best wood at all. If we were doing this for an experiment, a true experiment with controlled parameters, we would need ideally 3 trunks that were about as close to each other as possible in length, timber density, growing conditions, ideally from the same site, you name it. And each of the logs were all different. Although it was interesting to compare them from an experiential point of view, was incredibly invaluable from an experimental point of view. There were limitations it was just not worth pursuing. You just have to be realistic and see that there's much greater value in the experiential side of it at this stage that can lead on to experimental things. Now, as I said to the team throughout the project, that both experiential and experimental are not exclusive. One can lead into the other and vice versa constantly, and provide observations, whether it be an interesting experimental project that could lead on to an outreach project, or vice versa.
Brilliant. Okay, there's been a couple of questions that you've all been brilliant and started answering in the chat, which is absolutely fantastic. So one person's asked where can they find out more information to volunteer at Stanwick Lakes, and Nadia has put her email address into the chat, which is fantastic, which I think is the answer, isn't it, Nadia?
Absolutely.
Email you and you'll sort that one out.
Definitely.
Brilliant. And then we've had some questions about Operation Phoenix. Obviously, and Aiden's also put his the Operation Phoenix email in. But I think one of these questions is a really good one, Mike. Have you been this is from Mike Skelly. Aiden, have you been able to translate Operation Phoenix to any other emergency services around the area?
Yeah. So hi, Mike. I know Mike from Merseyside Police. We've been in talks. Yes. I'm currently recruiting Northants Police through the Police Fire Crime Commissioner team and the wellbeing team there on the police side to come across and start using the services as well. So that's exciting. So yeah, but that's a limit to at the moment. But early days, yeah. We've only been going like 2.5 years. So
yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Aiden. I certainly know from other presentations you've given, where you've had more of the team there, actually just what value they get out of this conversation and just actually being involved in it, which is really, really fantastic, which sort of links to this next question. So everyone, thank you for all your questions. There are more than we're going to be able to get through, but considering that our festival theme is on archaeology and well-being, I just want to come back to this question from Andy, and it relates to James mentioning togetherness and a sense of community amongst the participants. Do you consider that the same emotions and sentiments would have been important for building in the Bronze Age community actually at the time by that original community? Do you think is there a sense that we can draw a parallel across?
Absolutely.
Yes and no, for all sorts of different reasons. And I mean, clearly, as I often always say when people sort of say, well, do you feel a close connection for people in the past? And I often try to be quite empirical and, I'm scientific and objective about it. And I often say no, because for that stone tool maker or bronze axe maker, for example, their mindset will be completely different to mine. I'm making it either for a research point of view or whatnot, or I'm using slightly modern methods, or I'm, you name it, it's going to be slightly different. So from an emotion point of view or a feeling point of view, it's going to be slightly different whatever you do, unless, we put ourselves out in the woods for a couple of years, essentially, because you'd have to go through the whole process of selecting a tree and felling it and seasoning it if you needed to. However, I think the importance of capturing emotions and feelings towards a project, whether it be excavating in the ground or building a boat or casting an axe, it is such an intrinsic part of archaeology in the modern day. And for many people within archaeology have perhaps come across the occasional survey of what would you rather do if you didn't do whatever you did as a job, and archaeology always comes very, very highly. It's something that people often wanted to do since they were young, because it carries with it, as a profession, so many opportunities for levels of emotion and excitement and feeling that so few other jobs do. And whether it be from a professional point of view or from an amateur point of view, volunteering, you name it, there are so many different parts to archaeology, and that offer those emotional opportunities that can be very impactful. And as I said, I think we experienced a real range of emotions. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of happiness, a lot of laughter and fun along the way, and sadness as well. To make no bones about it, we got to the end of that project on that last day, and I think we all felt quite sad. We all knew that it was coming to an end. And whether there was a feeling of sadness in the Bronze Age, that this group of people had come together, they'd brought this tree in, they'd laughed and cried along the way to make this boat through the blisters and the blood, and got to the end. They were going to push it out in the water. It would be sent down the Nen and possibly come back with a handful of glass beads. Was there that level of emotion? Who knows? We're trying to reconstruct very, very specific scenarios from the past. But I think that's the one thing that will always strongly connect us to the people in prehistory, is emotion.
And blisters.
And blisters. Thanks, Aiden.
Emotion and blisters.
For breaking that heartfelt microphone drop. Hopefully, dear listeners, you're getting a bit of a feel for. There'll be me at the start of the day for the group talk, trying to really G up the group. I'm going to rake you over these logs, working away with bronze axes, and I'll give them a good or sometimes good speech at the start to really encourage them, and then I'll get a question or remark from one of the team that just completely breaks the illusion.
And at the end of every day, you do a wonderful instruction video and leave that with us.
Yes.
You do a drive-by and pop in and go, oh, I notice you haven't bothered with that. You need to pick up on this. And
Brilliant. Okay, there are lots of wonderful comments in the chat, and obviously we will share those with you. But I've just got one that was being put in the Q&A that I think is lovely, and it's from Helen, and she says, "Great presentation, thank you. I love it that the fire service personnel contributed with fire. Genius." Which I think is lovely, which is great. Yeah, no, just really good. Okay, there are lots of other technical questions. James, I'm just going to ask one in relation to all that. Where can people go and find out more, read more about Bronze Age boats? Is there a publication? Is there a place? Has anyone brought all of this conversation together anywhere yet?
No, and I can see there's various questions about sort of plank-based approaches for like the Dover boat or Ferriby boats. I'm actually up on the East Coast at the moment, close to where a couple of them were found. There are multiple publications out there, some for the Dover boats, for other Bronze Age boats. So there isn't a really good corpus out there. And unfortunately, some of those publications were very short print run and are now very, very expensive to get your hands on, which is a real shame. But it is out there. And I can see that there are plenty of other questions. Essentially, if this is something that interests you, whether it be using prehistoric tools or making prehistoric tools, or not just building boats, but possibly building other structures, I would advise you to, if not try and join the volunteering team, to at least come along to a couple of days, because it'll be me, the team, that will be there to talk to you and try and recruit you, really try and recruit you to get some more hands on tools to build some more things, because that's very much what we'd like to do. But if there are any other questions along the way, do drop an email or message on social media. We'll do what we can. And thank you very much.
Brilliant. And absolutely rest assured, we're going to get you back and do some more, because this is great conversation. And I can't wait. Just if I could, just to have a go on that boat in that lake would be absolutely fantastic.
We can sort that, Neil. No problem. We can sort that.
I know I'll end up swimming, but last year I did swim to a cranog, which was great. So actually to mess about on a Bronze Age boat would be even more fantastic. Okay, folks, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back to thank you at the end. But what I would just like to remind everyone is we will be sending out a short feedback survey. A post about it will be put in the chat and we'll email it to you directly. Please do fill that out. We're really interested about what you think about our This is Archaeology lecture series and what else you would like to hear about. So again, we can approach that whole world of archaeology and get them to talk about the things that you're really interested in. Obviously, if you've liked this donation and you haven't done so already, please do make a donation to the CBA. We are a charity. We have to earn everything we spend in a year. It's now £1 million a year it costs us to keep the charity going. And obviously, we do a whole host of things other than just do lectures. We obviously have our Festival of Archaeology and we run the Young Archaeologists Club, which has over nearly 80 branches across the UK. So there's lots of things that you can support and you can become a member. And I'm delighted to say that we're running a membership offer for the festival. So there's 20% off. So if you head over to the CBA website as well, you can find out more about membership. If you have full membership of the CBA, you actually get free access to the full archive of the This is Archaeology lecture series. So obviously lots of content you can go and explore at your leisure there. However, I am really delighted to be able to say that you don't have to wait a whole month for our next lecture. Indeed, you only have to wait 1 week because our second festival, This is Archaeology lecture, is next week. And it is Open Doors and Open Minds, Why Archaeology is Good for People and Why People are Good for Archaeology, with Aaron Johnson and Natasha Bramall. So this will take place on Tuesday, the 29th of July. Again, a link will be posted in the chat for that. Please do come along to that. Aaron and Natasha have been doing brilliant work around how archaeology connects people and enhances well-being, and a whole range of projects you can find out more about there, really reflecting on the CBA's theme of the festival this year, archaeology and well-being. And again, they're going to really talk about how this has been important in their own careers and the work they actually do. But for now, I would just like to thank James, Nadia and Aiden for looking after us for the last hour. It's been brilliant, really great to hear. And I think what you're doing at Stanwick Lakes is absolutely amazing. Personally, I don't think you need any upstanding heritage because you're making bucket loads of heritage just by engaging with people. And I think that live conversation and that actual activity is the really important thing. You know, you are just doing such amazing work there. So please, everybody, get over to Stanwick Lakes. It is a wonderful landscape to go and explore. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for everyone who has joined the talk tonight. If you can't wait until Tuesday, there are hundreds of events going on across the country for the Festival of Archaeology. So again, head over to our website and you can actually find out what's going on in your area and get active and participate. But for now, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone and thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.